bloodstream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy Thanksgiving week to all. And I'm going to start right now with a subject. You know, the Democrats are overplaying their hand and the GOP is underperforming on theirs, with the notable exception of the president. Here's what I'm talking about. Voter fraud in the United States is undeniable. You have illegal immigrants voting now. You have people casting multiple votes. You have the majority of dead people who vote for the Democrat Party. I call them the dead-ocrat majority. This is not even debatable. These things happen. And for the most part, if you're talking about voter fraud, you are talking about Democrats. If you put 10 cases out there of voter fraud, at least 9 of them will involve the Democrat Party. They cheat. They have done this consistently, even going back to the 1960 election, which was much closer than people choose to remember, in which it was widely thought that there was voting irregularities in Illinois, particularly the Chicago area, and in parts of Texas, where LBJ was from. And those votes, or lack of votes, depending upon how you want to characterize it, is what helped give John F. Kennedy the victory over a very experienced Richard Nixon. I'm not saying this because I'm a Nixon fan. Nixon had spent time as Dwight Eisenhower's vice president, and Eisenhower was very well thought of by the American people, and therefore he had certain experience being the vice president that John Kennedy lacked. John Kennedy did not have great experience. One of the ways he proved that was how he botched the Bay of Pigs, which directly led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Had he done what he should have done, had he done what arguably Richard Nixon would have done as president, then the Bay of Pigs would have succeeded. Castro would not have come to power or stayed in power. He would have been toppled. And Nikita Khrushchev would never have been so bold as to put missiles on the island of Cuba. That's the result of voter fraud in 1960. Well, you can't prove that. The nice thing that Democrats can always say about voter fraud is how unprovable it is. The problem with proving voter fraud is by the time you prove it, the result of the crime is already in place. That's the problem. But really, this is not about what people want to say it's about. We keep saying voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud. This is actually, the real problem is election fraud. As Joseph Stalin is famously quoted, and I mentioned it in last week's broadcast, the people simply need to know, it's enough that they know that there was an election. That's it. It's good enough that they know. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. And you see that, for the most part, in, say, Florida. Florida is the poster child for jacked up electioneering. And it's always Broward County, it seems. Going all the way back to the 2000 election in Florida, where George Bush ultimately prevailed. But this is not what you think it is. You say, well, it's voter fraud. You got the wrong people. No. Voter fraud involves somebody actually casting a vote. What you had in Broward County and also in Palm Beach County are votes materializing that were never cast. They were invented by the election staff, the supervisor of election staff in Broward County and in Palm Beach County. These votes didn't exist on election day. These votes didn't even, these votes were they materialized after the fact, after every other county in Florida had reported, and they decided that, you know what, we don't have enough of the right votes here, so we got to slow roll this process while we generate more votes. That is the problem. It's the same problem everywhere throughout the United States. Let me give you an idea here. This is back from actually 2016, I believe. To give you an idea of how just ridiculous the Democrats are about voting, about voter fraud and election fraud, which is really what it's about. Heavy.com, back on the 6th of November, so a couple of days before the election, they put out a list of all the frauds which had, all the states, which had allegations of fraud connected with voting or elections. It's a very long list of states. Let me give you an idea of what we're talking about. Here's a quote from the article before I get to the list of states. And this was released by John Podesta, who was Hillary Clinton's election, her campaign manager. He wrote this in May of 2015. They are reliving the 2008 caucuses where they believe the Obama forces flooded the caucus with ineligible voters. They want to organize lawyers for caucus protection, election protection, and to raise hard money. They are not just Colorado focused and have good contacts in the region. See, even Democrats know that Democrats cheat. It's wow. Arizona, election fraud and voter suppression worries. Remember, in Arizona, only 1 in 4 votes are actually cast at a polling place on election day. The majority, 3/4 of the votes, are cast by absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, whatever you want to call them. Nobody showed up at the poll. They filled out a piece of paper and mailed it in. That is, if you want to get rid of voter fraud, then you simply enact voter ID laws and make people show up at a polling place on election day. And that will drop dramatically, if not go away overnight. If you want to vote, then you will show up to vote. The people who have reasonable excuses not to be present to vote. If you are military and deployed, fine. If your work has you stationed, not temporarily visiting or traveling, but stationed outside of the country, then you also get the opportunity as an American living abroad, not visiting abroad, not on vacation, you too can fill out an absentee ballot. Everybody else, I mean, let's be honest here. Nobody is surprised by an election. If you're casting an election for the Senate, the Congress, or the presidency in the United States, the elections occur on the first Tuesday following a Sunday in November of even-numbered years. And they have for more than 200 years. There's no reason for anyone to miss that. So all of that is about being able to count the right votes at the time, because since they weren't submitted, I get to say what is and what is not a good vote. That's Arizona. California. How many of you remember the bags of votes during the California primary, Democrat primary, that people found in a truck that had not been counted, and presumably would have meant that Bernie Sanders would have done better in California and perhaps won that primary? But you know what? The fix was in for Hillary. We know the fix was in for Hillary. Why do you think Debbie Wasserman Schultz was removed as DNC party chair? So California, Connecticut, voter irregularities. They had a state rep in 2014 who was charged with 19 felony counts for voting early. 19 felony counts. Wow. 2015, they had issues in Bridgeport, and that had happened many times before. Delaware, voter irregularities. Florida, well, gee whiz. Florida, early voting concerns and election fraud reports. Notice how they actually get it correct when they talk about Florida, because this is actually the case throughout the country. It's early voting and election fraud. Did people actually vote early? Oh, we have all these tallies of people showing up and voting early. No. See, here's what you have. You have people casting votes that are not counted at the time they are cast. They're not counted. They are put away and stashed. And then you have other people who did not show up at the voting places either, and their votes come in. So now I have the people who actually cared enough about the election process to show up on the day that there was an election. Then you had everybody else who wanted it to be convenient for them, and you had everybody else who just didn't care and threw something in the mail. And two of those three groups of votes are not counted on election day. They're counted after the polls close on election day. And we've already seen what happens in Broward County, Palm Beach County, and if you think it happens in no other counties in the United States, you are wrong. In Georgia, you had a county that had more votes than there were people registered to vote. How does that happen? Why does that happen? Why is it allowed to happen? And that's where the GOP comes in, because all this stuff is Democrat shenanigans. But you have to wonder, where is the GOP in fighting it? Nowhere to be seen. Florida, wow. Georgia, vote flipping and voter fraud. Now, of course, now we've heard during this current election, or after this current race for governor, that gap-toothed chica, Stacey Abrams, can't concede. She's acknowledging that she's lost. She's not going to be governor. But everything is now about race. We know it's about race. It's a black woman running for statewide office. It's always going to be about race. I know how people feel about that statement. I'm sorry. I've been black all my life. I know how black people operate. And leftist black women are racists. and everything with them is about race. If they can't get their way, it's because you hate their black skin. I guarantee you that's what it's about. That's their fallback. That's their foundation. So she is making it clear that everybody who's opposing what she wants to do is wrong. And they're trying to suppress votes. And the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, who ran for governor, he should have given up his job if he was going to be part of this process. Oh, really? Even though most of the Secretary of State doesn't run county elections, by the way. The State Secretary of State does not run county elections. Just like the Secretary of State in Florida doesn't run Broward County elections or Palm Beach County elections. They don't run that. Brian Kemp wasn't responsible for what happened in the counties. Well, he held back 53,000 registrations because they were improperly filled out. They weren't completed properly. And you couldn't verify who these people were. And then, of course, the kicker. And 70% of them were from people of color. And there, of course, is the race angle. So what about the 30% that weren't? They were just as withheld. And for the same reason, which had nothing to do with race. People are putting in... See, this is interesting to me. Actually, you can make a test of it. If you can't fill out a mail-in vote application, maybe we shouldn't let you vote at all. If you're that stupid that you can't fill out an application to vote, why do I trust your judgment at all? So that, which would be interesting, particularly if you go to Georgia or other places that don't participate in the 98 language voter application process, like say the state of California might or does. And then have people fill out their voting applications in English. Well, that's racist. No, it's not. The language in America is English. Is it the only language spoken? No. But the language of business in America is English. The language of public discourse in America is English. The language of civics in America is English. The language of government in America is English. Why is anyone who wants to participate in any of those things not doing it in the common language? But with Georgia, they had issues with, voter machines flipping votes from Hillary to Trump, or so they say. But actually that was dealing with the county had not properly tested a particular voting machine. They took it out of service, and it's not as though one voting machine in one county in Georgia was going to give Hillary the state. Not going to happen. Of course, by the way, CBS 46, the local there, had reported back in 2014 that a group, a registration group with which Stacey Abrams was associated, had forged signatures after gathering more than 85,000 new voters. So, but she's crying. Illinois' vote fraud goes back, wow, long time. They had a woman who died in 1998. She voted 12 years later. A man who died in 94 has voted 6 times since. A man who died in 1993 voted 11 times since his death. In all, 119 deceased people had voted 229 times, and that's just in Chicago. And a city election board spokesman said these were likely clerical errors. Oh, well, they were clerical, but they weren't errors. Indiana, never thought you'd hear about it. You didn't know about Indiana voter fraud and election fraud in Indiana? Wow. There are investigations underway, although it's unclear if voter fraud occurred or if those are clerical errors. So you had Iowa, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Nevada, New York, that's not a surprise, Are you getting, no, excuse me, North Carolina? It's a long list, people. Ohio? We knew about that. You had that Meloise somebody woman back in 2012 who admitted she was convicted, given 5 years in jail for her vote fraud. Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, West Virginia. This is, it gets to the point where you really got to wonder where this is going. Let me give you an idea where this is going. The goal in all of this is to end the democratic process in that process by destroying the vote. You're compromising the vote so you can question the vote. And eventually, once you have no confidence in the voting process or the quote-unquote democratic process of elections, you know what you do? You then ignore the vote. In other words, you make what happened in Palm Beach County and Broward County, Florida, you make that the norm. You guys can show up if you want to. We're going to count out what we need to install the people that we think are appropriate. Therefore, the government is selecting its own leaders, and you are nothing. There are people who have made it clear that they understand the problem. They said, you know what, we need to go to a paper ballot and an audit trail. Yes, you do. If you really think voting is important, then to be honest with you, the less technology involved, the better. That's what you really have to look at and get into. Why am I trusting technology to do what needs to be done accurately when I can't verify it? When the people who are operating the technology can't tell you how it works? When the people who are programming it are not the folks who are charged with counting the votes? How do I know that they're doing this accurate? How do I know that these machines are counted properly? I do know this. If I write down what I want on a piece of paper, that's what needs to happen. When it continues not to happen, what you're going to end up with is elected government being seen as illegitimate. The process is bad, and therefore the government you get is bad. And we're headed down that road right now. We are. Once you deem elected government illegitimate, then you can remove the underpinnings of elected government. At the federal level, the Constitution is not to be observed because those who are serving in office or offices that are defined by the Constitution, well, they're not legitimately installed. Therefore, we don't need to listen to that, and we don't need that government. And if that government falls, well, what's going to become of the Constitution? What I keep trying to get across to people, and they don't want to believe it because simply they don't want to believe it, this is a path towards civil war. For those who forget, the southern states deemed the U.S. federal government as illegitimate and therefore ignored its constitution, set up their own, and set up their own nation, or tried to, and the result was war. What they're trying to do now is bring about the same thing. And the issue is not slavery, at least not yet, but the issue is the sovereignty of the U.S. government, period. The sovereignty of the U.S., of the American people, period. Until that is broken down, then those who are working so hard to delegitimize the government, to make America ungovernable, to make its processes laughable and a mockery, once that occurs, they can prevail in taking the country down. That's what this is about. And that's all it's ever been about. Now, the Dems are overplaying their hand. I'll give you an example. Orange County, California, which is the only Republican enclave per se on the California coast, all of a sudden they don't have a single Republican representative in Congress. That's ridiculous. And it's there because of two things. There's widespread voter fraud in California. That's an election fraud in California. That's known. But the other thing is the Republican Party, the mainstream Republican Party is pathetic, not only in California but nationally. They don't stand for anything. They are always trying to appease instead of going out and proclaiming what their message is. They don't do it. As a result, it's not easy to draw a distinction between a D and an R when you get into the voting booth. Particularly when you have Republicans who've gone in and said they were going to do one thing and never delivered on that. And now they have someone running against them. They don't have a better message, because let's face it, the Democrats have no message. But when you had a message that you ignored once you took office, what's the difference between you and the person who's now running with no message, but just people are tired of you lying to them? So I'll give somebody else a shot. The Republican Party got a wake-up call on two fronts. One, they need to stop ignoring election fraud, which they have been ignoring for better than 50 years. The other thing is they better stop acting like Democrats so that people can see the difference, decide on the difference, and vote. Back to not ignoring election fraud, you need to pass and enforce laws and change your system so that not only you but everybody have confidence that their vote was cast, was recorded, and was counted. Unless you want to go through a different form of government. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Following on with what we talked about with election fraud in the first segment, let's talk about the Democrat Southern strategy. And let me explain that, because as many of you well know, the progressive argument, the long-standing argument that they have is that the Democrat Party is not the party of racists, even though they always have been and continue to be to this day. What they will say is that what happened is the Democrats who were racist from their inception all the way through Jim Crow, all of a sudden switched parties and they all went into the Republican Party, and that's what made the Republican Party racist to this day. Well, that's nonsense. They can't name the people who left except for Strom Thurmond. They can't name anybody. Robert Byrd was a wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He never changed his party affiliation. Sam Nunn was a Democrat, a moderate Democrat, very well respected, but he was never a Republican. This changeover never occurred, and it's a stalking horse. It's a straw man. It's a flat out lie. Democrats are what they are. They are the party of slave owners. They are the party of welfare. They are the party of welfare to re-enslave those who were set free by a war and 3 amendments to the Constitution. It is Democrats who would enslave again and have enslaved again. And they've done it without plantations. They've done it without walls. They've done it without chains. And so loyal are the slaves. It's an interesting thing. Black people are so loyal to the Democrats. They are no less loyal to the Democrat Party than slaves were to their slave masters during the period of chattel slavery in this country. Those slaves were so loyal that many of them, after their freedom was declared, either refused to leave or after leaving would actually go to court to sue to be reinstated as chattel with their master, because that's what was comfortable for them. So on to this. What is the current Democrat Southern strategy? Because it is a Democrat Southern strategy. And we saw part of it in the election of Doug Jones to the Senate in Alabama, which is lie about your opponent, bring in a bunch of illegitimate votes, and electioneer this thing until you win. It is widely known that counties in Alabama kind of jacked things up in the election. We also know of the busloads of people coming in from other states into Mississippi to vote in that election, and Doug Jones somehow prevailed. Now, Doug Jones has not necessarily been a great example of what the left would want in a senator, but he was not the other guy whom they claimed was some type of a sexual pervert. He wasn't. I'm sorry. He just wasn't. But now they've brought this over into two very important states, particularly Florida and Georgia. What is their strategy? No different. We don't have to worry about finding moderate candidates anymore, because Doug Jones, you could argue, was a moderate white guy. Now they've gone out and found the most radical people that you can have. Let me help you out. For those who do not know, the most radical leftist people in America are black females, followed closely by some, but not necessarily all that many, Latina females. But if you want to find radical, if you want to find bald-faced, bold, in-your-grill radical people, you will find folks like Stacey Abrams to run for anything. Stacey Abrams was unable to, with the help of election fraud in Georgia, to overcome Brian Kemp. However, she has a problem with what occurred.
Welcome back. Some breaking election overtime news to share. It appears that we finally have a conclusion of sorts in the Georgia gubernatorial race. Moments ago, Democrat Stacey Abrams acknowledged she has no path to victory in her race against Republican Brian Kemp. But she did not concede. Take a listen.
This is not a speech of concession, because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy. Now, I could certainly bring a new case to keep this one contest alive, but I don't want to hold public office if I need to scheme my way into the post. Because the title of governor isn't nearly as important as our shared title, voters. And that is why we fight on.
Abrams' campaign had been hoping that there were enough uncounted ballots that would get her the votes necessary to at least force a runoff. Abrams says she will file a federal lawsuit against, quote, gross mismanagement of Georgia elections. But you heard those comments. Those felt less like a concession. Obviously, it's not a concession. More like, perhaps, an announcement speech.
Indeed, it is an announcement. It is an announcement that if she did not win, then everything was tainted. Everything was wrong. Let me ask you a question. Had she won, would it have been any less tainted than she believes it is now? Would it have been well, because here's what she and her followers believe. Well, the only reason she didn't win is because somebody else cheated. No, let me help you out. The only reason it was close was because she cheated. If you honestly believe that the state of Georgia, outside of Fulton and DeKalb County, where it is overrun by blacks are the majority in Fulton and DeKalb County, particularly where the borders of Atlanta are. Let's remember that Atlanta is the capital for HIV infection for black people on the planet. If you honestly think the state of Georgia has designs on spreading the policies that enabled Atlanta, a once great city of black people, to become this cesspool that it is now, you are sadly mistaken. You have not been paying attention to the different enclaves of mostly white neighborhoods who have petitioned and broken away from Atlanta to no longer be associated with that place. If you honestly think the rest of Georgia is overlooking that and saying, no, we want Stacey, you are fooling yourselves. They don't want that woman. They never wanted that woman. And had there been a straight up and down vote the way it's quote unquote supposed to be, she would have lost by a decisive margin. But now what she can say is, well, the law. Oh, okay, so now what she's saying is it's an announcement. We're going after the law. We're going to file a lawsuit. We're going to go after this because we need to undermine anything that keeps us from having our elections set up, run, and adjudicated in our favor. She was involved with that effort back in 2014 that brought in 85,000 votes, and that stuff was fraudulent. She was involved in that, and she wants to continue that. That is the Southern strategy for Georgia. We are going to fraud this thing until we can say, they keep claiming Georgia as a purple state. The only place where Georgia is blue is Atlanta. Outside of Atlanta, Georgia belongs to red. Donald Trump won the state. Wasn't necessarily that close. But what they want to do is throw enough dust in the air so that you honestly think, and then of course it is the bravado of the black woman. How dare you? If you oppose me, you hate women and you hate black people. And white people still cower before those accusations, which is infuriating to me. White folks, if you're not racist, don't let some gap-toothed chica who's got more debt than the office she sought would pay try to tell you that you're something you've never been. Stand up and just say it. You know what? You can say what you want about me. I'm not a racist, but she is very far left-leaning. She lies about it. And no, we don't want you as our governor. See you in 4 years because we know you're not going away. In Florida, the Southern strategy is more brazen, but with a more moderate-sounding candidate. Andrew Gillum is a socialist, period. And the irregularities in his campaign, the people who are associated with him, that he knows what they think. He knows what they're about. And he has no way to distance himself from them. He is a socialist. He is the mayor of a city, Tallahassee, that has a poverty rate twice that of the rest of the state and actually twice that of the nation. But he wants to govern the whole state? Really? You think the whole state wants to have the same poverty rate that you've allowed to persist in Tallahassee? Is that what you believe? No. So what was the strategy there? Starting with 2 counties, which would be Broward, renowned for its election fraud tactics, and Palm Beach, which is not much better. And the supervisors of elections in those places are 2 liberal women, one of them black. Therefore, of course, you can't come against her without being a racist. That's the way it goes, right? Right. Didn't quite work. Andrew Gillum tried to play the right role. Okay, we took our shot. We didn't get it. And now we lost. Well, not exactly. So he made a concession. He withdrew his concession. The cheating went on. He's hiding folks in a church where the reporters are coming for while the election is going on. The supervisor of elections of Broward County is with him at some black church getting praise and support. What's that about? Nevertheless, on Saturday, the 17th of November, the mayor of Tallahassee had this to say.
Andrew Gillum has officially conceded the Florida governor's race to Republican Ron DeSantis. Here he is in a Facebook message to his supporters.
And I wanted to take a moment to congratulate Mr. DeSantis on becoming the next governor of the great state of Florida. I'll tell you, this has been the journey of our lives.
This is the second time that he's conceded. The first time was followed by machine recount, automatically triggered because the results were so close. Ron DeSantis will take office in January.
Let's just overlook the fact that he was under and remains under federal corruption investigation. Let's not forget that he took gifts from an undercover FBI informant. Let's forget all that. Because this is the Obama approach, which is, I'm as crooked as the day is long, but I am going to sit up here and hug my wife and profess my undying devotion to everything and everyone good while I am an evil individual. Andrew Gillum is evil. That's all there is to it. He is no less evil conceptually than Barack Obama, who gave an air of grace and dignity while he systematically sought to destroy the United States of America. It's ridiculous. But that's the strategy. Run, lose, concede, cheat. Maybe you can get it. Okay, I'll concede again. And he'll be back in 4 years. Donald Trump acknowledges he's a force to reckon with. No, he's not. But the machine that has taken over the Democrat Party, which is a globalist, anti-American column of people, they are a force that America is going to have to reject and put down forcefully. ABC News talked about what I consider the Southern strategy that Democrats have in Florida this way on their Sunday news program.
The high-stake election battles in Florida and Georgia. The highly contested Georgia governor's race is now officially over, with Georgia certifying the election results, confirming Republican Brian Kemp as the victor. This comes a day after Democrat Stacey Abrams ended her campaign, saying she couldn't win. Now, Governor-elect Kemp responding by calling for unity. And in Florida, Democrat Andrew Gillum conceding for a second time in the heated governor's race, while state officials race to finish their manual recount in the Senate contest.
Yeah, the deadline now just hours away as one troubled county is admitting 2,000 ballots are missing. ABC White House correspondent Tara Palmieri is in our Washington bureau with the very latest. Tara, good morning.
Good morning. It's been 12 days since the midterm elections, and still some of the Florida's races are still too close to call, including a key Senate race. And now at the 11th hour, a new setback. This morning, time running out in the hotly contested Florida Senate race as election officials reveal more than 2,000 ballots are missing. Broward County officials announcing Saturday they believe an employee may have misplaced them, some calling for the removal of the county's beleaguered election supervisor, Brenda Snipes. After the first round of recounts in the Senate race last week, Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson trails Republican Governor Rick Scott by just 12,603 votes. The deadline for manual recount, noon today. Meanwhile, a concession in the other hotly contested race in Florida. Democratic candidate for Governor Andrew Gillum stepping aside and congratulating opponent Republican Ron DeSantis.
RJ and I wanted to take a moment to congratulate Mr. DeSantis.
This is Gillum's second concession since he admitted defeat on election night.
We didn't win it tonight.
But when results narrowed to a difference of just 0.5 percentage point, an automatic recount was triggered.
I was never really in danger of losing because my margin was big enough. Now I can go forward without having to worry about this.
The Florida elections, like in years past, have been plagued by technical glitches, missed deadlines, and even power outages. Republicans invested heavily in the Florida Senate race, targeting a seat they could flip to expand their slim majority. Dan?
We keep talking about Florida. I suspect that will not change for many years to come. Tara, thank you.
No, it's not going to change for many years to come because the people of Florida are unfocused. If you really want freedom and to have that and to invest that or have that invested in a democratic process, then you have to have clean elections. You don't have clean elections in Florida. You don't have clean elections in Georgia. You don't have clean elections in Iowa. You don't have clean elections in North Carolina. You don't have clean elections in California. You don't have them in Nevada. You don't have them in Montana. You don't have them in Virginia. You don't have them in West Virginia. You do not have them in Arizona. Are you getting the picture here? You don't have them in Illinois. You don't have them in Massachusetts. You don't have them in New York. Are you getting the picture here? The Democrat strategy is simply to cheat, to manufacture votes, and count until they get the result they want. They did it in Alabama. They came very close to doing it with regard to a Senate and gubernatorial seat in Florida, and they came not too far away from getting it done in Georgia. If Georgia and Florida go to the Democrats, the nation has a problem. The states, it's not that the states themselves have a problem, they will, but the nation would have a problem. And it's not one from which you would easily recover. There are two ways to fix this. One is for the people to rise up and demand that the laws be changed and that their election processes be strengthened and that they get rid of all these things which are the source of irregularities. In other words, you go to this. We know when election day is. If you want to vote, you carry your behind to a ballot place, to a polling place. You present your identification so we understand who you are and that you should be allowed to vote. You cast your vote. You go home and wait for the result. Oh, and by the way, we get rid of these supervisors. We get rid of these people with party affiliations to count. And you know what you do? You bring in Deloitte and Touche. You bring in an accounting firm whose only job is to administer or to count the votes. You also change these voting machines that are programmed by people that you don't know what they're programming and you can't validate it, and you go to something much simpler. Well, it's going to take a lot of time. How long have we been counting votes in Florida? How long have we been counting votes in Georgia? I don't need to have a result the same day. I just need to have a result that I can believe. But the Southern strategy of flipping Florida and Georgia, like they hope to flip Alabama, which is going to be pretty hard, like they hope to flip Mississippi, which will be even harder. They've already shown you their hand, and they've shown you that they're going to use people of color because they can wield the race card for some time to come. It's not, white people have not yet stood up and said, I'm not racist and I'm not hearing you. As a matter of fact, if you call me racist, I'm going to vote against you simply because you called me racist. I don't care what color you are. I'm waiting for that to happen. When that happens, maybe some of this will stop. In the meantime, you see what you have. And if you think 2020 is going to be better or different with your inactivity, because you have yet to do anything about this, then again, you're mistaken. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the first hour. We are now looking, since the Democrats have, in my opinion, fraudulently gotten control of the House and not allowed their losses in the Senate to be greater, they're now hinting, at least the Democrats in the House are hinting at their ridiculous agenda. Representative Eric Swalwell went out and made a dumb statement on Twitter implying that the federal government might actually use nuclear weapons to get people to comply with increased gun control legislation. It was an overstatement, true. But the idea that's not being overblown, let's be clear, the idea that the United States government might use nukes on its people was hyperbole. But the idea that the government should impose this on citizens that do not want it, and that is what Swalwell would find, is not overstated. That's what he wants. He made the statement in his tweet, so I'm sure if we talked we could find common ground. There is no common ground. There is no common ground between someone who says legal citizens should have a free right, or their right to have firearms of their choice it should be not infringed upon, and someone who wants to infringe upon those rights. There's no common ground there. And this goes along with what Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have said about Medicare for All, that it's going to save people money. And they're going to push for this now, trust me. And I'm going to ask you this. How can Medicare for All save people money when Medicare for Some has more unfunded liability than the federal government has debt? It can't. No, in the same way, no matter how much gun control legislation you pass, the only thing you're going to do is create more victims for those who will disobey those laws to shoot. You're not going to protect anybody unless you've forgotten that so many of these mass shootings occur in gun-free zones, which are made gun-free by useless legislation. Guys, you really need to understand this. For the next 2 years, the most significant thing you might get out of this, provided Donald Trump holds the line on anything resembling reason, is an infrastructure bill that we probably can't afford. But at the same time, we really do need to do something about the infrastructure in this country. I believe that. Particularly as you're going to pick up economic activity, you need an infrastructure that can support increased economic activity. So that is something we should do. That is something we should address. And the Democrats seem to want to address that. The problem is, I guarantee you they'll find a way to propose it that makes things worse and not better. I guarantee you, because that's the way they are. That's who they are. They take a good idea and then screw it up and then try to tell you how much they care about you. And that's supposed to make you overlook the fact that they've screwed you. It doesn't work for me, but it seems to work on some others. I'm not going to try to say that I understand. But at this point, you got to buckle up and really figure out what you're going to do, because 2020 is coming, and the same tactics that they use to put themselves in a position to say the foolish things they're saying now, they're going to employ those same election rigging tactics 2 Novembers from now. And I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
In the American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster 1828 edition, the meaning of the word race is defined as a series of descendants, indefinitely. Thus, all mankind are called the race of Adam. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the word racist means one who hates another of a different race or skin color because of their difference in appearance, place of origin, or existence. Thus, when I hear President Donald Trump espouse the need to stop illegal border crossers from coming into our republic and systematically wreaking havoc, it never occurred to me that he is racist or hates non-white people. The truth is, the president is seeking to do what every homeowner does daily to protect the entryway into our country and protect us from harm and preserve our American republic. The United States has been accepting far too many legal immigrants and illegal border crossers, thus endangering the unique, exceptional nation status of our beloved USA. Of course, leftist Democrats label those who actually seek to protect our sovereignty as racist bigots. But actually, it is they who are the bigoted ones against America and are doing the bidding of George Soros to destroy America from within via illegal border crossers. I'm Ron Edwards. Don't miss the Ron Edwards Experience Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us and Sunday midnights on Talk America Radio.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, I'm sitting here now watching Facebook devolve, and I don't know quite yet if it's reached a tipping point where what's wrong with Facebook, and there's quite a bit wrong with Facebook, has finally gotten to the point where it's going to fall. I don't know if we reached that point yet. But I can say I remember it all began about 2 years ago with information like this. And this is from CBS in May of 2016.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is defending his company against accusations of political bias. He invited conservative leaders to meet about a report the site favors liberal views in its trending topics. Zuckerberg writes in a post, quote, "We have rigorous guidelines that do not permit the prioritization of one viewpoint over another." Jan Crawford shows us how Facebook is being pressured to reveal secrets. Jan, good morning.
Well, good morning. So in that online post, Zuckerberg said that Facebook does not censor conservative topics. Now, his decision to personally address the controversy comes after Facebook announced it was investigating claims that workers put a liberal spin on social media content.
The Internet has enabled all of us to access and share more ideas and information than ever before.
With more than 1.6 billion users, Facebook has become a key player in the distribution of news. But CEO Mark Zuckerberg is battling claims the site doesn't play fair.
Find out what everyone's saying and sharing and liking. What has happened to our party? Not liking.
At issue is the process Facebook uses to decide what's trending. After a report that Facebook manipulates user data to weed out politically conservative news stories, the Guardian newspaper got a copy of Facebook's internal guidelines. Reporter Sam Thielman.
They can go in and inject new topics. They can delete topics that are duplicate or inappropriate. They can blacklist things that they think they shouldn't be in trending topics. I think the guidelines themselves are very straightforward, and I think they try very hard to maintain objectivity.
But this week, the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, Republican Senator John Thune, called for a congressional inquiry.
Consumers have rights, and we want to make sure that we're protecting consumers' rights and that businesses aren't, in fact, engaging in any kind of deceptive practice.
Zuckerberg says he wants to meet with leading conservatives and people from across the political spectrum to discuss how Facebook can remain, quote, as open as possible.
They have a history of trying to maintain good public relations, and they're going to do it. My question would be whether or not that will actually affect their internal operations. I suspect it won't.
After those internal documents were leaked, Facebook then made those internal guidelines public. And the company is really just trying to emphasize, in its words, that, while a team of editors vets the content, that what's trending, well, that's primarily generated by those computer algorithms. Gail.
Thank you very much, Jan.
The computer algorithms, as though they write themselves? Interesting. And the editors can go in and do their little puts and takes, but of course the editors have no bias. Look, I have my own history with Facebook. I'm on yet another 30-day ban from Facebook for whatever they think is in violation of their community guidelines. But this was 2 years ago, in May, where you're listening to people say, well, it's not what you think it is about Facebook. I don't know if anybody really believes that anymore. When all the revelations came out, and then you started having information like this from Kim Commando.
Don't underestimate the trouble that Facebook is in right now. Kim Commando with your Tuesday Consumer Tech Update. Facebook is at a crossroads. Its survival rate as the king of social media is for the first time in question, but its management doesn't quite get it. There's nothing really new about how the political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica collected and used data on Facebook users. This is the way it's been at Facebook since the beginning. For years, CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been promising to fix Facebook. Yet phony news and conspiracy videos continue unabated. Daily usage is way down. Its top executives dodge Congress about Russian interference. And behind the scenes, these same top executives are selling their Facebook stock at a record clip. There's even a trending hashtag, delete Facebook. This would be a very good time for Facebook's board of directors to recall the collapse of MySpace and to remember what happened to Nokia and BlackBerry, whose management was once just as arrogant as Facebook's is right now. I'm Kim Commando.
That is the issue, arrogance. Facebook is a company that essentially is a multi-billion-dollar company that produces no product, which was one of the reasons why people had a problem getting on board with the stock buy in the first place. They overcame that, and Facebook has managed to make money. But there is this issue of their arrogance. There is an issue of bias. And there is an issue that management is not paying attention. And all this points to one thing. They are a bunch of progressives. Because this is the way progressives behave. Once you give them money, they believe that their superiority has now been vindicated and validated by the fact that they are profitable or have money, and therefore whatever they do must be right, otherwise they wouldn't have this money. That's how they think. Is it true? It doesn't matter, though. That's still how they think. Now, 4 months or so after that report, you had CNN reporting this on the 26th of July of this year.
It just opened a few minutes ago. Facebook shares are plunging. Chief Business Correspondent Christine Romans is back. Brian Stelter is here as well because this is very much a media story as well. So, Christine, I'm looking at the stock trading right now down 18%. What happened?
Just crushed here. A strategy shift for this company. They will focus now on privacy first, and that means privacy over profits. They will have to spend a lot of money, billions of dollars in coming quarters. That will slow growth, and that will hurt the profits of this company. That's what the company says itself. You know, it needs to put privacy first. It's had a terrible run here with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the private data of Facebook users being disseminated and in some cases sold. And then you have election meddling and fake news, the proliferation of fake news. So this is a wake-up call for investors in Facebook that it is no longer the Wild West. This platform that began as rating how hot girls were in college dorm room has now grown up into something that is part of democracy around the world and needs to act more responsibly. It will have to spend money to do that.
Here's the thing. This sell-off, it seems to be, I think a lot of analysts would say who take the long-term view, very short-sighted, Brian. This is a company that once again pointed out yesterday we've reached 2.5 billion people around the world. And the way that companies stick around for the long term and mature, one could argue if you're long Facebook still, is that they invest to fix problems and to make the company more sustainable and better. Is that not what Facebook is doing here?
Yeah, Facebook's investing so that people like the three of us stay on the site and don't go fleeing to a competitor. Facebook's revenues were up, 42% year over year.
Love that revenue.
What an incredible number. Any other company, 42% growth year over year. But it is remarkable to see a CEO like Zuckerberg, who did start it as a service to maybe meet girls, to have to address the reality that this company affects democracy and have to take action by hiring reviewers, hiring content analysts, and things like that.
Christine, I will say the last time Facebook stock was down this much was July 27th, 2017. So also in July, we were on the air together. It was when investors had so many questions about Facebook's mobile strategy.
That's right.
Stock fell over 11% that day. Look what Facebook did on mobile to correct course on that so quickly. This is a huge company, but a nimble one.
It is a nimble company, and look, it is a company that's market cap is $630 billion. I mean, it's a big, enormous company. An 18% decline, though, is personally that's 16 or 17 $1 billion off Mark Zuckerberg's net worth, although he's not going to cry about that, I'm sure. And, there are 120-some countries that have GDPs about the size of what this company just lost.
Which is all the more reason why they've got to take responsibility for some of their problems.
That's right. And look, they've had a big run of bad press. How many times have we been on the air talking about privacy, fake news, election meddling, all of these things?
Yeah, you have to fix the problems. And I was wrong. And not 2017. It was 2012. I mean, the last time they've had a sell-off like this, long time ago. Wow. Feels like yesterday. I will say Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, along with some other tech execs, will be on the Hill, right, Christine, in September, answering a lot of these questions.
And they've also been in Europe answering these questions, the Europeans. The other thing is get out in front of the regulators. I mean, if you're Facebook, you want to show that you're spending money and you're getting out in front of the regulators who could potentially slow your profit more if they put in more onerous privacy rules.
Right, that's a big part of this. They have to put in these improvements, some of these safeguards that are necessary for various reasons. But that number you mentioned, 2.5 billion, that is a remarkable number. That's Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, all of these parts of the company. They have a remarkable amount of control over people's digital lives, and with that control comes responsibility.
It does. But again, Facebook stock down 18% on a day when the Dow, the broader index, is up 150
that
points.
trade detente with Europe is what should be driving the market today, but instead Facebook's getting all the energy.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.
If you couldn't tell, that was a CNN report, and the Facebook apologetic crew was definitely working overtime. Well, it's a big company, and they got to do this stuff. And there's guys, when the investors start leaving, let me help you out. You don't have a problem. They've recognized you don't know how to deal with the problem. And it's not what they're trying to say. Well, remember they had the mobile thing and they said, no. This is an issue of the thinking of management. Facebook is politically biased. That's pretty much what it is. And that bias and their arrogance about that bias and their denial of that bias is causing people to get off the platform. And that is affecting investors who know that Facebook has no product. They sell nothing. So if people are not using it, then all the passive ways in which Facebook generates money from folks using their platform, it really becomes problematic. The investors have already said, you know what, we can do better than this, because this is a chancy proposition in the first place. The other thing that makes this interesting is on the 17th of November, the New York Times actually reported that Mark Zuckerberg was fiercely defending Facebook in a question and answer session with employees, pushing back against criticism of the company in the wake of a New York Times investigation into how it reacted to Russian influence operations. So it's no longer investors. We went from accusations of bias, and we went to observations of management arrogance, to a massive drop in confidence of investors, and now you're having to defend yourself to your employees. Facebook's in trouble. And personally, I don't think it could happen to a nicer group of people. Do I think Facebook can be saved? I don't think the current management group can do it. And that's not to say that they're going to go under and everything's going to fall apart. I don't know. But they're going to have to make some adjustments. And these are adjustments that are not comfortable for them, because it means they would actually have to be objective arbiters. And no one running social media companies, at least not the large ones, are ideologically capable of that. Case in point, this report from RT from March of this year. Oh, and this concerns Twitter, by the way.
Leading internet voices are beginning to question whether the social media platform Twitter has a left-leaning political bias. Some are claiming there was an attempt to silence conservative voices after Twitter CEO removed accounts believed to be automated bots. Natasha Sweets with the story tonight.
Kim.com, a German-Finnish internet entrepreneur, claims that Twitter is censoring conservative tweets. Now he's telling RT if these practices continue, that he'll create a Twitter alternative. an alternative that he believes would make the chirping birdie obsolete. Right here, you can see .com boldly addressing Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey saying, quote, "If you keep messing with our free speech, Jack, I will build a team to create a Twitter alternative without censorship. Twitter could be toast within a year. I hear you're hurting about the Trump presidency. Don't let your frustration destroy your business." Now, as many of you know, President Trump is known for getting his own message out to the public without the so-called mainstream media through Twitter. Well, some Twitter followers of the president claim they no longer see his tweets or even his son's. Here you see Matt Couch claiming the tweet of Trump Jr. being censored, saying Twitter censorship is out of control, America. Kim.com believes Twitter is particularly fading out tweets regarding the investigation surrounding the late Seth Rich, former DNC staffer. Just like Trump Jr.'s tweets appearing to be censored, .com claims a similar scenario here. .com tweets, "Hello, Jack. Quick question. How come Twitter is stopping its users from retweeting certain tweets that are active and haven't been deleted? This screenshot is an example." During the Russia investigation, when Twitter claimed Russian bots were retweeting the president's content, many users under suspicion were erased. In a statement, Twitter said, quote, "Twitter's tools are apolitical, and we enforce our rules without political bias." Now, .com says that he does enjoy using Twitter and will give Jack Dorsey a chance to respond to his claims of censorship. And he says that he will not create a Twitter alternative as long as its users are protected from a political bias. In Los Angeles, Natasha Sweet, RT.
Well, we already know about Twitter's bias. More recently and more famously, they suspended people like James Woods, who is a prolific Twitter user and right of center in his views and very critical of the left at times. And all of a sudden, within a few weeks of the election, you could no longer see his tweets. And he was very much in the right-leaning camp as the elections approached. And all of a sudden, he was gone. It's interesting. You have to understand something. Those who control the larger platforms, and I don't know how they do this, but they tend to be very left of center, markedly so, unabashedly so. The only way to disrupt them is to simply not use the platform, because at the end of the day, these social media platforms are companies that sell no product. They depend on usage, and they derive their passive income, for lack of a better term, from exploiting, and I'm not using that term pejoratively, but exploiting those who actually are on the platform, passing that information off to different people in different ways so that they can try to use what information they can glean about people who are on the platform so that they can make money. I am watching Facebook finally get the comeuppance that it should, which could, if you're dealing with the right type of people, get it to straighten up and fly right. But the arrogant management actually hired more arrogant employees. And while Facebook management is trying to respond to external pressures, they're actually having to defend themselves to their own employees. And there's an old political saying, if you're explaining, you're losing. And they're having to explain themselves to their own people. I think this is fascinating. I do not know what's going to happen. I do not claim to know what is going to happen. However, I do know this. Facebook is biased. Twitter is biased. And if people really get to the point where they're willing to entertain an alternative and one is made, then both of these could very well go the way of MySpace. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamerica.us. TalkAmericaRadio.us, Also, WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, it's all fun and games until Donald Trump plugs the border. And of course, what I mean by that is the caravan that has been working its way through Mexico on foot, for example, for the most part, has made it to Tijuana and found out that no one's letting them cross into the United States. As though Donald Trump did not make this statement back on the 1st of November.
At this very moment, large, well-organized caravans of migrants are marching toward our southern border. Some people call it an invasion. It's like an invasion. They have violently overrun the Mexican border. You saw that 2 days ago. These are tough people in many cases. A lot of young men, strong men, and a lot of men that maybe we don't want in our country. But again, we'll find that out through the legal process. But they've overrun the Mexican police, and they've overrun and hurt badly Mexican soldiers. So this isn't an innocent group of people. There's a large number of people that are tough. They've injured, they've attacked, and the Mexican police and military has actually suffered. And I appreciate what Mexico is trying to do. So let me begin by stating that these illegal caravans will not be allowed into the United States. And they should turn back now. And we've already dispatched for the border the United States military. And they will do the job. They're setting up right now, and they're preparing. We hope nothing happens.
Donald Trump told people, and told them consistently regarding this caravan, two things. You will not be allowed into the United States, and I will deploy the military if necessary to make sure you do not enter the United States. As though people don't believe Donald Trump, they didn't take him at his word, and now he has effectively closed the border using American troops. No one has been harmed, at least not by Americans at this point. They have just been taken down and told, no, it's not going to happen. The interesting thing is, now that the nation of Mexico is no longer an easy flow-through tea bag for people trying to come from Central America and get to the United States, we have a different dynamic forming almost immediately. Reuters reported Central Americans stalled at U.S.-Mexico border mull work offers. Mexicali, Mexico. Hundreds of migrants from a caravan of Central Americans were stalled at the U.S.-Mexico border on Saturday, where a handful said they welcomed recent Mexican offers of employment in the face of a hostile U.S. reception. Get this straight. They were told that there would not be a hostile U.S. reception. In some cases, they say they were promised that if they could just make it to the U.S., everything would be all right. The U.S. would welcome you. Even though Donald Trump said, no, it's not going to happen. The Mexican government last week reiterated job offers to the migrants, saying that those who obtained legal status could occupy thousands of vacancies, most of them in the country's maquiladoras, doing factory work. Factory work, which is what a lot of Americans would like to do in this country. Since arriving at the border last week, they have been denied entry through the gates linking Mexico to the United States. Dozens of the mostly Hondurans waited in lines to bathe and wash clothes, sullied from 2,600 miles of relentless travel. Several members of the caravan, which left the crime-racked city of San Pedro Sula, Honduras, on October 13th, man, they've been doing this for the better part of a month, more than a month, told Reuters they would be willing to stay put in Mexico rather than face rejection across the border. Are you hearing this? They're not trying to get to the U.S. by any means necessary. They're trying to get a welcome reception by any means necessary. Getting into the U.S. was not what drove them. Or let me restate that. Getting to the U.S. was not what drove them. It was the promise that they would be welcomed at the U.S. or would be able to enter the U.S. and not have a problem. That has been taken away. They were lied to. and now they're stuck in Mexico. If we had work, we would stay. This has been very tiring. Well, considering staying, we do have this from Media Research Center .com, Media Research MRCTV.com, and they cited a France 24 report about what happened Friday night. Hundreds of Tijuana residents protested overnight at Friendship Park, a beachside square where the migrants have set up camp along the fence between Mexico and the United States. Singing the Mexican national anthem and shouting anti-immigrant slogans, some protesters threw stones at the migrants, even targeting children in some cases, an AFP correspondent said. "Get out of here!" A group of around 20 people shouted at a camp of Hondurans near the border. "We want you to return to your country. You are not welcome." Wow. There's actually video of this, and forgive me, I know that not everybody speaks Spanish. I'm not a fluent speaker of Spanish in any way, shape, or form, but I think you'll get from the tone, this is Facebook video that a correspondent took in Tijuana recording this confrontation between Mexicans and these migrants from Central America.
Primero México, primero México, que se vayan, primero México, México primero nuestra seguridad, México primero nuestras familias, primero nuestra nación, después de ellos, entraron con violencia, se van con violencia, entonces, no van a hacer nada ustedes, pero nosotros lo vamos a hacer. ¡Arriba México! ¡Arriba no hay problema! ¡Arriba México!
Tranquilo. Ahora no. Tranquilo.
Somos mexicanos.
Tranquilo.
Es una problema.
Tranquilo.
A la chingada.
Tranquilo. Señores, tranquilos. Tranquilos, señores, para atrás, por favor, para atrás. No hay que caer en provocación. Tranquilos, no hay que caer en provocación. Para atrás, por favor, para atrás. Tranquilo. No vengamos a provocar, por favor.
Didn't quite sound like a very welcoming group. The gentleman at the beginning of the audio clip who was saying, Mexico primero Mexico, that's Mexico first. Is that any different than what the people of the United States have been telling Democrats? We want Americans to come first. So now Mexicans in Tijuana are looking at the migrants and say, no, Mexico first. There are also invitations, if you will, for the migrants to return to their countries. They weren't stated quite that diplomatically, I would say. And they were told they were not welcome. Tranquilo. That was from the police, and tranquilo roughly transmitted Trump roughly translated is, take it easy, calm down. Let's not get worked up here. Because tensions were rising. They do not want the migrants there. They were willing to allow them to pass through, but now that everybody knows that Donald Trump meant what he said when he said you will not be allowed into the United States, now what do you do with these people? Mexico has decided to ship some of them back home. The ones who were determined to get to a place that wasn't going to accept them, and they weren't applying for asylum in Mexico, so Mexico deported them. Do you realize what this means? Donald Trump has changed or has begun to change the whole dynamic of illegal immigration by doing one thing: securing the U.S. border. This is not the securing of the border that he hoped for or ran on, which was to actually build a physical barrier that people in the Customs and Border Patrol Agency would police, but he was frustrated from doing that because the Republican majority in the House and Senate did not follow through on the president's campaign promise, which was part of why he was elected. They didn't do that. So Donald Trump, not one to give up on anything, said, fine, we'll send troops. That has been effective. It has effectively closed the border to the point where these people now recognize they're not going to be welcomed in the United States. There are no open arms waiting for them here, and now they have to deal with where they are. And Mexico has woken up and saying, if you guys are not just passing through, I'm not saying you got to go home, although I wish you would, but you definitely got to get up out of here. Which basically means if you want to be here, you better come into our country the right way instead of trying to tell us, excuse me, while I pass through to America. All America had to do was say no. And they did. Donald Trump did. And of course you have the people on the left complaining, we have troops out there doing nothing. No, they're not doing nothing. They are securing the sovereignty of the U.S. border. And they are effective at it. And as they do that, Mexico is going to consider its border with Guatemala to be inviolate. And we're going to stop it. All it ever took to start turning off the flow of migrant caravans was for the United States to say you can't come here. Because then it's like, well, if I can't go here, maybe I can go to Mexico. But Mexico has its own rules, and you have to deal with Mexico. Mexico is now having to deal with their own rules because people are not just passing through anymore. This is brilliant on the part of Donald Trump. It's just brilliant. We said we're going to fix the problem. Everybody made it sound like it's such a difficult problem to fix. Really? Close the border and watch the problem start correcting itself. If you're not welcome here, then the Mexican people are going to let you know how they feel about you being there under these circumstances. And Donald Trump has reiterated, we want the people here. We simply do not want them to come illegally. Well, what are you going to do about this situation? Well, stop trying to be an asylee. Stop applying for asylum status, which requires you to be in the United States, and apply for refugee status, which you can do from anywhere. And there's really no difference between an asylee and a refugee, because if your status as a refugee is granted, even if you are in Honduras, if you are in Guatemala, if you are in Nicaragua, if you are in Costa Rica, or wherever you feel that you are being put upon, you can apply for refugee status in that country or in the next country over or wherever you want to. And if your petition is granted, the United States will help relocate you to within this country and give you a work permit that you might immediately gain employment once you get into America. Why would anyone not choose that over walking 2,600 miles, some of these people did, to be rejected, unless somebody told them something that wasn't true? We're seeing now the beginning, that we'll see whether or not Donald Trump is able to follow through on this, because Congress is going to have to back him up, and now we have Democrats running Congress, so now it's up to the presidency and the Senate to see what they can do without the House of Representatives, we imagine. But all he did was plug the drain that was draining Central America and Mexico into the United States illegally. When you plug that, everybody all of a sudden becomes interested in the sovereignty of their nation first. Mexico primero. No different than saying, make America great again, by respecting our borders. And then Mexico will respect their own borders. And then those other nations or people from other nations will either have to work to fix what's wrong in their country, or they'll have to seek legal remedies to exit. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamericaradio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, freedominamericaradio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. Let's talk about this mangled Me Too message that CNN is producing with respect to sexual harassment allegations in the House of Representatives. They filed this report on Friday.
The House Ethics Committee issuing judgment against two members of Congress involving sexual harassment-related complaints. One of them is a Republican, the other a Democrat. And I want to bring in MJ Lee, CNN's national political correspondent, to tell us more. Fill us in, MJ.
So two members of Congress have been reprimanded by the House Ethics Committee in two separate reports. The first report involves Congressman Mark Meadows. He's a Republican from North Carolina, for failing to take prompt and decisive action to deal with alleged sexual harassment in his office. Now, all of this has to do with his former chief of staff. His name is Kenny West, and the report says that his behavior was, quote, inappropriate in every sense of the word. Now, making matters worse, according to this report from the House Ethics Committee, is the fact that Congressman Meadows did not terminate West, this is the former chief of staff, but rather demoted him to the title of senior advisor and then continued to pay him, even though the report says there was little evidence that he was actually performing official duties. Now, Congressman Meadows is being required to pay back the $40,000 that he actually continued paying this former chief of staff to the Treasury Department. And I just want to read a key portion of this report regarding Congressman Meadows. Here it is. There is no place in any congressional office for looking up skirts or down skirts, staring at a woman's chest, unwanted touching, or making sexual comments, even if subtle or in jest. And then it goes on to say, just as between members and their staff, a power imbalance exists between senior staff and junior staff in congressional offices. This, I thought, was such a good reminder that sexual harassment on Capitol Hill does not just involve members. Sometimes it can be between staff. And obviously, Anna, this is politically significant because Congressman Meadows is not some junior member in the House. He obviously has a lot of clout. He is the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, and he is also a key ally to President Trump. Moving on to the second report that came out from the House Ethics Committee, this involves Democrat Ruben Kuhn. He's a congressman from Nevada. He actually has already announced that he's not seeking re-election, so he will not be coming back. But nevertheless, this is an important report involving his own actions. He was himself accused of sexual harassment, and the report says that Kuhn made persistent and unwanted advances towards women that he worked with. And again, in this report, too, it says that there is an inherent power imbalance when members romantically pursue individuals who have to work with them. I just want to read a key portion of the statement that we just got from Congressman Kuhn as well. It says, after much reflection and introspection, I recognize that regardless of the fact that I never intended to make anyone feel uncomfortable or disrespected, what matters is how my actions were perceived by the women who came forward. I extend my sincere apologies to each of these women. Obviously, Anna, we know, and we have discussed this a lot on our air, there's a lot more work to be done when it comes to sexual harassment in Capitol Hill and how that is reported and treated. But obviously, these two reports are very significant in that they address the actions or the lack of actions taken by these two members of Congress.
And it goes to show that this issue sees no political sides. I mean, It's bipartisan in terms of the issue affecting all parties, all people. In all fairness, I want to read a statement we just got from Congressman Meadows as you were walking us through the allegations, again, pertaining to a staff member of his. And he says, 3 years ago, I asked the Committee on Ethics to review the matter surrounding the alleged conduct of my former Chief of Staff, Mr. West, and I am thankful their review has now concluded. I appreciate the committee's acknowledgement of the immediate, appropriate, and good faith steps I did take after learning of my staff's concerns, including immediately separating the chief from the accuser so they never had to interact with him personally during the independent investigation. He goes on to say, making sure my team feels safe and secure in our office is the highest priority for me, and I'm truly sorry for any stress the situation caused them. I thank the Ethics Committee for their work in resolving this, and my office will remain committed to serving Western North Carolinians every day to the best of our ability.
Let me make some observations about that. It was a 4-minute plus segment, and they spent, this is CNN of course, they spent 3 minutes of that talking about the Republican who harassed no one, and 1 minute about the Democrat whom the report says was grabbing women's buttocks and thighs. Are you serious? This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy what they're doing, but that's CNN. So let me get this straight. You think that a guy who found out about a problem, separated the offender from those who were being offended and harassed, is no different than another guy, both of them congressmen, who actually was putting his hands on women who didn't want to be touched. You think that's the same. So much so that you overemphasize, you spend 75% of your report roughly talking about the guy who committed no sexual harassment, and only 25% of your time talking about the Democrat who did. This is not unprecedented with CNN. This is not unprecedented with the press. Let's not forget, we still have not had a full press or other accounting of Bill Clinton, even though you couldn't help but look, the guy was sitting up there violating, well, she didn't feel like she was violated apparently, violating an intern in the White House with a cigar. He was being filleted just outside the Oval Office by the same intern. He has credible rape allegations that go all the way back to his days at Oxford, where they kicked him out. He was a Rhodes Scholar who lasted 1 year because they kicked him out because he raped somebody in the UK. But we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to talk about Mark Meadows, who didn't touch anybody, found out about something, and then dealt with it. And that's its equal important. Actually, it's more important about the Republican who didn't touch anyone than the Democrat who did. Here's what's interesting to me. Very interesting to me. A young lady who worked for the congressman from North Carolina, her name is Alyssa Farah. She saw the CNN headline, "The House Ethics Committee admonished two male lawmakers, Republican Mark Meadows and Democrat Representative Reuben Kihuen, related to investigations of alleged sexual harassment." Here is her statement on Twitter. "This headline is misleading, so let me clear it up. Meadows never sexually harassed anyone. His former staffer did. I know. I am one of the women in the report. I respect the ethics committee, but my experience was that Meadows had my back, took me at my word, and respected and protected me. How come that wasn't in the report? How come the fact that the Republican is the one who actually respected the women and took actions to try to deal with it, well, how come he didn't fire the guy immediately? He initiated an investigation. You tell me what would have happened had he fired the guy prior to the investigation being completed. You tell me whether or not we would not be looking at another lawsuit. Not another lawsuit, a lawsuit, because there wasn't a lawsuit here. This was just a bunch of House. And let's not forget the House Ethics Committee doesn't have a lot of credibility here, because we still have that discovery of that list of all the folks that Congress pays off, and they have a special slush fund just to do it. Get out of here with your hypocrisy. Your hypocrisy is sickening. Very sickening. But this is the Me Too message in a nutshell. If a Republican, if we even sniff that there was sexual harassment anywhere near Republican, that is front page and multi-day front page news. This is no different, although on a lesser scale, than the Kavanaugh nonsense. 35 years ago, somebody who can't remember where it happened, when it happened, and lies about who was there as it happened, makes an allegation, and you want to drag a man through the mud, despite the fact that there are more women coming out of the woodwork saying, all we know about Brett M. Kavanaugh is he's been good to us. The guy puts more females as clerks. He has an all-female clerk staff as a Supreme Court judge. And no one has ever accused him of acting inappropriately toward any woman except one woman who can't remember what happened and another one who admitted she lied. Actually, there's two that admitted that they lied. However, Brett Kavanaugh is forever linked to sexual harassment, and he should be impeached for what he never did. But the liar, formerly known as Christine Blasey Ford, took her $1 million or so of GoFundMe money and is now off doing whatever with no repercussions. When are you folks going to wake up and see that the progressives and the Democrat Party, they are evil people? That's all there is to it. What they want to do is appeal to you on the basis of your sense of decency while they display none of their own. What they want you to do is hear a rumor and be willing to recoil in horror and clutch your pearls that, what? A congressman didn't stop this? Well, actually, yes, he did. But what about the congressman who not only didn't stop it, he was the perpetrator? It was his hands on women's behinds. It was his hands on somebody's thighs. It was him who was pursuing these staffers romantically. It was him whom they complained about and had to get involved. No one was protecting these women from this harasser. And he now gets to exit Congress. Is anybody going to file charges? I didn't hear about anybody filing charges. You would think that somebody might, because, hey, you know what? You got the ethics committee backing you up. As ratchet as that group is, at least you now have a report that acknowledges that, yeah, you were harassed. That's illegal. Are you going to pursue it? The double standard is obvious. The hypocrisy is thick. the cheating that they just finished doing in this most recent election, everything about this is telling you that progressives and Democrats are process evil people. They put on a good face, but in all of their dealings, they are out to undermine and destroy what makes America a decent place to begin with. They will cheat at elections. They will lie about elected officials. They will cover up for those whom they like. They will try to oust by any means necessary those whom they disagree with. And the input of the American people is optional at best. They want your input only if you agree with them. If not, let's go in the back room, print up some ballots, and totally remove the electorate from the process, and we will govern against their interests without them holding up a fraudulent election result saying that we have the right to do so. And 2020 is coming. And that's our show. God bless you and God keep you is always my prayer. Happy Thanksgiving to all as it comes up, and do hope you enjoy plenty of food and even more, plenty of family. And really reflect on the fact that despite the troubles that we are currently experiencing and not fighting hard enough against, we're still a blessed people in a blessed land. Until next week, take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.